If you work in utility safety or ops, you know the landscape changes fast. New safety solutions, updated grounding procedures, and the constant push for better leadership. It's a lot to keep up with. That's where Incident Prevention Magazine comes in. We are the industry's go-to source for real-world safety solutions. From in-depth articles on arc flash protection to ready-to-use tailgate topics for your crew, IP gives you the knowledge, insight, and strategy you need to get everyone home safe. Don't just react to the job, stay ahead of it. Subscribe today at incidentprevention.com. That's incidentprevention.com.
It's like doing a recognizable hazard. We do it all the time. We switch, but why would you be down there with him pulling an elbow off? Now, at least he's got his rubber gloves on, but to me, from my training, that's an improper way of doing that. When you got an exposed, now you actually violate minimum approach right there. What if he slipped and fell on that elbow? Nothing happened. Just shows you an unacceptable, but it's a repeated task. It happens all the time. You lose the focus, distracting, whatever, complacency. And then Arkwright went on to say this: we've got to learn from the experience of others. Why can't we? This is where I came from in all this. After all these years, all the way back to the mid-90s is the statistics I use when I do consulting and training, cover up, grounding. Why, if we know there's 20 or 30 people a year gets killed and that's documented, why do we keep doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different outcome? But we do. Got to realize the danger without suffering the hurt. Now, Preston Arkwright was the president and CEO of Georgia Power back in 1920. You think about that. The same thing was happening in 1920 as it's happening today. It's just, it happened at a much higher rate back then than it's doing it today, but we're still doing the same thing. Why? Common sense and good judgment. It's great advice found in a lot of safety books. The only problem is common sense and judgment comes from experience, and it's not equal with all employees. Human performance through acceptable work practice is more than just common sense. That's all it is. Standing on top of a ladder we know is unacceptable, but yet there he was. They were rebuilding a substation here and drove up, and I asked him, I said, you need a new ladder? Need a taller ladder or a bucket truck or something? What do you well, all I got to do is this one little thing. We're okay. Employees always do what they're expected to do. Is that correct? No, they don't. Not based on that last picture, they don't. No, they do not. We do not. Guarantee you, I didn't do it either. But I finally learned that I needed to. Local culture will determine the amount of risk. We talked about risk drift. We accept a certain amount of risk. If I air test my gloves and check them, visible inspection, as the ASTM 496 tells me to do before use every time, then I reduce that risk. But when I don't, I increase it. Employee actions are driven by possibilities of severity and consequence. Is it a matter of convenience? This is what it is. Accepting more risk allows unacceptable work performance. That's just all that really is. Stuff happens every day. 80% of the accidents are caused by decisions resulting in unacceptable work. If you go back and look at every accident out there, there's something that happened in there, that could have been prevented. There's an action taken by an individual employee or a group of employees that was not completed per the standard or the regulation or the company policy or the manufacturer's directions of the equipment they were using. If you select the incorrect and unsafe way of doing it, what are you doing? You're increasing the risk. You do it because it's easier, saves time, or you just more comfortable. I'm confident. I was doing a cover-up class for a company way out in Texas one time, and we did the cover-up class, and then the guy, one of the senior guys, he was a 25-year employee. He came up and told me, he said, well, y'all just wasted my time. Oh, really? Okay. And I said, why? What do you feel that way for? He said, well, we just don't have time to put all that. He said, besides that, our trucks don't even have that much rubber on them. But that just goes to show you they've been doing the unacceptable for a long time and nothing has happened. Well, I said, well, I'm sorry, but I said, this is 100% guarantee. If you do it this way in the manner in which we've demonstrated to you, then basically you stand a virtual guarantee that nothing's going to happen to you. And I can document that information by history, historical statistics from my company that I worked for 40 years. Well, he was still not satisfied with that. 6 months later, I get a phone call from that company saying that gentleman backed into a hot 7200 switch or 7620, I think, a 13.2 system. And of course, he didn't kill him, but it burned him up. And he didn't have any cover on it. And I don't say I told you so. I hate it that it happened. But why? Another example of unacceptable work. Set a pole on a Thursday, came back on Friday morning to change it out. It came up a thunderstorm Thursday afternoon. So therefore, we basically said, okay, we got to fold the tent and go to the house. All right. And they come back the next morning and you look, there's no rubber. Now that's an optical illusion. That wire's that conductor right there is probably about 10 or 12 inches from the pole itself. Now it's hard up against the neutral right here. The insulator's broke. They got up there, the injured got in his bucket and went straight up there, and he took the switch and the arrestor down, folded the high side over and laid it against the neutral of all things. And the meters are still on the houses. Okay. That ought to tell you something. And then he was trying to take his bolt-on stirrup off, and it was froze up. This was down in Florida near the ocean. And he couldn't get it off, so he took a pair of bolt cutters and he was going to cut it off. He put the handle of the bolt cutters up on his right shoulder, got both hands on the left like this, and was going to get the leverage to pull down on it. He stuck his elbow into this pole top pin on this pole, brand new CCA pole. And of course, it tracked down the handle to his shoulder, and then it exited on his left elbow on that pole top pin, because he was only, about 5 feet from the neutral, hard against the pole. I know that's a wood pole, and I know that's, quote, an insulator, but it's not an insulator. It's a difference of potential, okay? Well, there he is. You see where it entered his left shoulder, and there's where it comes out his right shoulder and his left elbow, and right above his row of gloves. And of course, they called me and told me, said a pair of hot cutters had failed. And I said, hot cutters? Now, hot line bolt cutters to me is 54-inch handles on it with a ratchet handle on it, to where you can actually work it with leather gloves on if you're not violating minimum approach with any other part of your body. And he said, no, this is just an 18-inch pair of bolt cutters. And I said, that's not a pair of hot cutters. What are you talking? He said, well, it's got fiberglass handles in it. I said, that's unacceptable. There's no dielectric grading on it. You can't dielectrically test it. That's unacceptable work practice. But yet it was being done virtually all over the place down there after I was doing crew visits, and found out later and saw it again. A little while, I told him, I said, y'all just got one guy burn up. Now you are doing it again? You got to be kidding me. What are you doing? Come on, man. Well, anyway, I wanted to ask him this, and I don't. This is an Odie. This is a Jeff Espinship. He said, have you ever wished you had a glass navel? And that's when your head's so far up a certain part of your body that you need a window to see out. And that's basically, what I say, think about it, guys. It's just not the right thing to do. Here's another unacceptable work practice. This is an old Vulcan rope off of a D845 Altec line truck that they had replaced. So he made a sling out of it, got knots tied in it. So you know what that is. But the big thing is, this is the bottom half of a tubular steel transmission pole, flange right here. And when this end to the right is not much larger than the end to the left. And this is almost the balance point, not quite. And then when he picked it up, it started rotating it around. The big end slid. That flange cut the rope, and then there's the end of the pole fell into the operator's seat. Fortunately, he was good. He was able to get out of that seat, but it did hit him and drove him into the back of the crane and into the ground. A very serious injury. I don't know if that boy ever went back to work or not. The really bad part about this is there was 7 or 8 people standing there watching this happen. A general foreman was standing here watching this happen and didn't say anything. And they had a wire rope sling that they could have used on that steel pole, and it never would happen that way. So is that unacceptable work practices? Yes. And also a Kevlar sling, choker sling on a square concrete pole won't work. And when they picked it up, they figured it out because it slid all the way through the sling, and we had it standing straight up, and it fell over and went through the cab of the truck. That was another Florida thing. And then look at this one, and I try not to make folks look bad and stupid in these things, but how do you figure where is that the appropriate tool to be? And of course, this is somebody stealing current, and I guess the fascinating part about this one to me is who put these coat hangers in here, guess what? They didn't have a problem. But this gentleman here came in the service truck because they had, low current, low use on this meter. He took the cover off and found it. So he's going to take his favorite pliers, which is not insulated. It's supposed to be 1,000-volt pliers, or either de-energize. Why don't you just de-energize it? Get an outage, knock the transformer out, take, the lugs out, pull the wire out, and it never would have happened. But as it is, you see what it did. Burn his pliers up. He had a flash burn on his hands. Just not a good time. There's just all kinds of other things out here. More examples is what I was talking about. That really, it really takes the toll. Well, here's the fact of the matter is, what is the greatest asset to a company? Is it the equipment, the bucket trucks, the customers, the buildings, the facilities? No, it's us. It's employees. Without diligent, hardworking, honest, credible employees and leadership, a company's not going to function. It's not going to stay in business. It cannot do that. It can't work at a level of accepting the amount of risk that we've been talking about if it was one company with all those things happening to it. But the employees also, on the other hand, are the greatest liability the company has, because of the tort liability they can get into with customers or contractors or anything else out there, the damages they can do with trucks, or the mistakes is made out on the crews to damage property or damage themselves. So that's the bad part, okay? And the fact of the matter is, and I think everybody agrees with this, there's nothing out there, and there's no task customer or anything else that's more important that we could sacrifice our safety to complete or serve. No, there's not. Management supervision agree that safety is number one. Talk's cheap, money buys land. That's what I've always heard. It's okay to take time to be sure the job gets done, even when you're not on a hurricane or a tornado or an ice storm. And that used to be the safest part of trouble catching. Back when I was a young apprentice and lineman, we rarely had anything happen to anybody on storms because everybody was so focused on the storm and the activity. Now, 2 weeks into that storm, that's a different animal. That's when fatigue and complacency kicks in, and that's usually when people start getting hurt, okay? It's up to the employee to either accept it or reject it. The acceptable work is what employees should be looking at. It's a fundamental value is all it is. A total commitment to safety. It's not a goal. It's not a procedure or program. It's a value. We value acceptable work and the minimums of operational experiences. Well, how do we learn to be qualified. And the bottom line is this: we're visual learners. 30% of what we see or what's written down, we might remember. 15% of what we heard or hear, but about 80% of what we see, we're going to do again. And I asked this question not too long ago: how much does senior linemen with apprentices out there and young linemen that's in, they've got their ticket or they're trained and qualified, but they don't have the experience. What are you teaching them? Are you teaching them the traditional values of why safety is so important? Or are you showing them, well, that's the way they do it in a training center, but here's how we do it out here? I've seen that. Okay. So we see, whatever an apprentice sees us do, they're going to do it. I guarantee you, because we're visual learners. Well, majority of the times things does go right. We don't have a lot of problems going wrong, and we never really expect things. But when the unexpected does occur, like a blown engine on a takeoff roll, that's a 767, and the port engine just came from together to apart. And all of a sudden now, he don't have enough runway to stop. He's got 50% power loss because he's got to shut this down, turn on the fire suppression units, give it all the rudder he can to keep it on the runway because that starboard engine's trying to push it to the left. So now he's got to do right rudder and get straight. And he had to go. Are we ever really ready for an emergency? What do? We practice CPR and first aid and pole and bucket rescue and complain the whole time we're out there doing it, hoping we never do have to use it. So, and I did it for years and years and years. I never had to rescue somebody off a pole. Now, I did do CPR 2 different times but it was not employees. Okay. And one was an employee and one was a neighbor, but still. You practice through that pilot right there, practices stuff like this. Well, every 6 months they have to go into a sim, and it's a dial of disaster. They try the sim operator will make everything on that airplane quit working at one time or another, and you have to recover and save everybody on that plane. I'm not sure we prepare enough for emergencies here. We have emergencies. Here's a hurricane. And then it may not be all our fault because, customers set us up sometime. This is, of course, a hurricane here. And what happened here, this transformer, this triplex is still hooked up, goes to a house. Somebody improperly hooked up a generator, and now it's feeding back. And that transformer is a 2-way street, high voltage in, low voltage out, low voltage in, high voltage out. And the generator's sitting over there running, and we walked up there and looked at this thing and said, wait a minute, let's see what we got here. And sure enough, the meter was still set, the main was still closed, and on that lead, hanging right there out of that transformer, in the clear, had 7,200 volts on it. So, if you walked up and just picked things up and started kicking it around, they don't tell what you're liable to get into. It's 24/7. It's not just 8 to 5. We got to do it all the time. It's not just on storms. It's every day, every job, everywhere. How does a company of crews operate? Well, you have a culture established, and it's different cultures at different locations or different levels. Who's responsible for those differences? And I remind you again, it's employees, because we're the ones that's out there doing the work. Okay. We set the culture. Supervision has a great amount of influence on it, but again, I'm finding a lot of supervisors are in positions right now that it's whatever reason, right size, capsize, downsize, organize. They may be put in a position to where they don't know the job too, and they're out there to manage the people, not the job. So you got a problem, or you have the potential for a problem. Then sometimes people are just promoted into jobs that they maybe shouldn't have. I don't know. Performance of the culture, the employees do it. It's an invisible thing. You can't hard to get your arms around it. The way we've done it around here, I've heard that many times. Well, we ain't never done that around here. I've heard that many times. Well, it doesn't matter if that's the way you've done it or I've never done it. How should you do it? And that's what you need to ask. What is the acceptable manner in which we should be working? Not the way it's easier, not the way we've done it. Think about it. Normalization and deviation. That's when demonstrated behaviors deviates. In other words, our training, our work procedures, practices, expectations, and beliefs. Unacceptable work practices becomes normal. Okay, I don't need my hard hat right here. I don't need my safety glasses. I don't need to put my work gloves on, or I don't need to ground this. I'm just going to go up there and stay in the clear. Whatever the description is, it's like a bad habit, and the bad habits are like a good, comfortable bed. They're easy to get into, and they're hard to get out. That's a duplicate right there, Nick. We need to take that out. Caution, this machine has no brain. You got to use your own. I love that sticker. That ought to be on every bucket truck, every line truck. I wanted to put one on my airplane, because, that airplane's dumb as a rock, just like a car. It can't, well, some cars can drive themselves, but airplanes can't fly themselves. Do you get them in the air? And then you mash the magic buttons and then the avionics takes over. But that's okay. When we don't use our brain, we can get in trouble. When we don't follow look at there, no outriggers on that side. Isn't that amazing? And then, of course, he had the outriggers down on the right side of the bucket, but he had the outrigger legs down on the rail with no cribbing underneath it. And when he started leaning the bucket over to work on that street light, it slipped off the rail and turned over. And actually a train was coming by very slowly. And he fell right on the front apron of that train, that engine. That was a real one. That happened pretty close to me. I wasn't associated with it, but production culture, result of unacceptable work. That's when the only getting things done is what gets measured. Okay. Safety talk, but not done, not measured. Performance is not part of the supervisor's job or responsibility. It's to get it done at any cost. Okay. There's another video. It's supposed to have hid that slide. It didn't do it. I'm sorry. Production culture increases the unacceptability of what's going on. It's a failure of management, and it's a failure of employees. When we operate in a production culture for production only and don't worry about safety, then everybody around us has failed to do what they're supposed to do. It's unacceptable. When you stand there and watch somebody do something unsafe and you don't intervene or you don't question the work habit, do you need some more rubber there? Is this grounded properly? Is this traffic condition set up right here? I mean, we've had people getting killed more than once in work zones. Action was endorsed by all parties. If you stand there and don't intervene at all and don't say anything, you just signed off on it, said it's okay with me. OSHA courts hold supervisors and managers accountable. When you go in and God forbid you ever have to do this for depositions or testifying in court in cases of where liability, tort liability, or has been, it's in a court case, that is, you'll see what happens. And it's not pretty at all. Even though managers and sometimes supervisors are not on the job site, they're still held accountable for what goes on that job site by virtue of training records and past inspections and everything else. Acceptable culture behaviors are internalized, safe behaviors, and all rules and everything are followed all the time. Operational excellence equals safety excellence. If I operate excellent and I follow all the rules and regulations, the manufacturer's operating procedures and everything else, what's going to happen to my safety? More than likely, that safety record will, be pristine. It'll be perfect. Acceptable safety culture is not just a mere absence of accidents. Basically, it's a culture. that has systems and processes in place to ensure everyone is working. That is each one looking out for one another. And then it finally comes down to that individual contribution by certain people, by certain employees. And I'll just use an aviation incident right here to kind of describe this. That's Cactus 1549 right there. That's an A321 aircraft, and everybody remembers this, or it should. But anyway, that's the plane that flew into the geese and lost both engines. And he turned this big old 340,000-pound airplane and passengers and everything on in cargo into a glider, and he only had very few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, to figure out what he's going to do with it. And he was in New York, taking off at LaGuardia. And I've done that many times, and they ain't nowhere to go except the river. And he put it in the river, and they called him a hero of the Hudson. What did he tell them? What did he tell the newsman? He said, I ain't no hero. I just did my job. I did exactly what I was trained to do. And, Mr. Sullenberger, you did a wonderful job, sir. Commendable. They tried to recreate this thing in a sim, and it took like 25 times before they could actually do what he did once without training. Now that's acceptable, to say the least. Well, the mechanical part here, as I said earlier, on subpart P, it tells us to look at all the elevating and rotating equipment inspection before we use it, or you follow the boom pulse off of it. And that's why that's a regulation. That's why it's in there. Well, change employees, you change the culture. When the only way you can change employees is education. You can't scare them into being safe. You can't threaten them. You got to make them, as President Eisenhower said, you got to get them to want to do the right thing. It's not a manager, supervisor, safety advisor, because we're not out there. Employees set the expectations, either acceptable or unacceptable. They can require a commitment to safety. Now, the employer can create the environment, provide the training. This is Kansas City Power and Light at the time. Now it's called Evergy or something else up there, but this is the cover-up program. We were training cover-up up there for the crews. Nice place, facility, on indoor facility. But, that's an employer responsibility. Now, once that employee's been trained, what do we do then? Follow the training, Department of Labor, OSHA management alone has the 5A general duty clause. They knew they could not write a regulation for everything that could go wrong out there. Okay. They couldn't do it. So, they put this general duty clause in here. It says each employee shall comply with it didn't say employer, did it? Each employee shall comply with occupational safety and health standards and regulations and orders pursuant to the act in which are applicable to what? It's not just line work, his own actions and conduct. So what are we doing? It's task specific. I mean, you look at PPE standards in the 1910-269 standard for generation, distribution, and transmission. Does it say anything in there about chainsaws? Say anything about chaps? No. But if you're using them, or if you're felling a tree, where's that regulation? Back in 1910-266, logging. So there's what the general duty clause is all about. You need to understand not just line work, but all the other regulations that goes along with the task that you're asked to perform. It's the management responsibility to do that, and then it's a personal responsibility of employees to do it. But unfortunately, a lot of times, employees make this statement, well, ain't nothing happened, so I'm okay. I didn't do it like I should. I may have acted unacceptable, okay? But the reality is if you don't correct it as the employee, other employees, supervision, management, whatever, needs to be notified, identified, and then corrected, okay? Employees can make a difference, and they do make a difference. I can document that, and many times. Management supervisors should model what's acceptable. I hear what you're saying, but I can't see it. That's that supervisor that gets out of his truck and tells somebody to put a traffic vest on or a hard hat on. He don't have his hard hat on or vest on. I know you may have never seen that, but I personally watched it firsthand on an ice storm one time. And I asked the supervisor, I said, did you take a pill or something this morning where you don't have to follow these rules? And he does. That ain't right. No, you cannot send a mixed message. You can't say, I'm going to fine you for getting killed. It just, it don't work. It just does not work. The key acceptability lies with the employee, and that's the bottom line. And that is accountability of what we're doing, who's doing it, how we're doing it. The employees were willing to accept it. Yeah. Employee culture and past practices and reasons for unacceptable acts occur. What does the industry continue to accept it? I don't know. That's what I was talking about earlier. Why do we keep having the same thing happen, a flash or contact every week, a fatality about every 2 weeks or so, or every 3 weeks, a month, we'll wind up. And just like that one day I was talking about, we had 3 fatalities that one day. That's the scariest thing I've ever heard of. I like to wreck my truck when somebody told me that. The answers to this, it's a result of training or performance. That's the bottom line. It's a symptom. It's either will or skill. I'm willing to do what I'm supposed to do, or I don't have the skill and never been trained to do it the way you want me to do it. Either one of those can be fixed very easily. And practice makes perfect, right? No, it does not. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you practice the same thing over and over again, expect a different outcome, that's insanity, especially if it's unacceptable. No, you cannot do that. When employees understand anything less than acceptable is not permitted, then things will change. It's a demonstrated change. You can't talk your way out of something you behaved yourself into. Don't know who said that one time, but I think it's a very accurate statement. If you made that mistake and you knew better than making that mistake, you can't talk your way out of it. You can't blame it on somebody else. Don't say, well, the supervisor should have told me. No, don't go down that road. And this was an accident I had to investigate right here, and it's a very long accident. Don't have time now. I'm over time now, and I'm already running late. But let me tell you something. There was 2 foremen and an engineer and about 5 or 6 other substation and line crew personnel watched that young man in that bucket right there, a new lineman, put a mechanical jumper from that phase to a neutral on the other side of that frame by mistake. And they never said anything. And then when it happened, they called me and told me a mechanical jumper had failed. I said, what do you mean failed? He said, I don't know. I just took it off the jumper holder and put it on the phase and it blew up. I said, that jumper didn't fail. Y'all need to look. I'm on the way. But sure enough, before I got down there, they figured it out. Are you your brother's keeper? I am my brother's keeper. And you notice the names on there? I thought that was pretty cool. I found that in a locker room somewhere. I don't even remember where it was at. But each one of them signed their name saying, I am my brother's keeper. I'm going to look after you. I care for you and your family. Well, I think it was John Wayne said this. If I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have took better care of myself. That's the way it is. I'd have done a better job on lockout, tagout. How about that? Or I would have went and found a right receptacle box to put something up. It's give an E for effort for sure. Just remember this as we start to close. Absence of accidents doesn't assure the presence of safety. Just because something's not happening around you don't mean that you're doing everything as safe as you should be, because you're not, or you may not be. Many tasks can be performed unacceptable and undesirable behaviors. We just looked at a bunch of that through here, and I guarantee you, failure to wear seatbelts is one of them. Failure to proper distribution cover-up, maintain minimum approach, failure to, we saw every bit of this, PPE, so, and then fall protection. There's the picture on the cover-up and PPE, nothing happened to them. But that wound up being a fatality. That was down in Florida. I didn't have anything to do with this. Just somebody sent me this picture, but they had a contact because they didn't cover up. Leroy standing there watching them work. Nothing happens to them. Yeah. That ain't the first time they've been in a hole. It was not, subpart P of 1926, 650. No. A little humor every once in a while doesn't hurt, just to kind of get everybody's attention. And of course, PPE is really important when it comes down to that. It's just like he's got his welding mask on. Wait a minute. He's got his welding mask on, but he forgot his PPE. He forgot his FR and art rated clothing. He's got his welding gloves on. That's good. Now they didn't fall. If they don't move, he don't fall. That's teamwork. That's being my brother's keeper. But it's not meeting fall protection standards. Acceptable leadership is this. Anything unacceptable is preventable. Every task can be completed. Acceptable. Injuries, getting hurt. They told me when I went to work at Georgia Power in 1967, said, if you don't get hurt every once in a while, boy, you ain't doing nothing. I thought then, I said, I got to get hurt to work here? That don't sound good. Safety is everyone's responsibility, and then everyone will be involved. And that's the key. Involvement promotes ownership, and ownership is pride, and then acceptable. Acceptable work is a condition of employment. That's kind of hard, but let me tell you something. I've seen people fired for unacceptable work. That's just the way it is. Just beware of nonverbal endorsements, and I'll end it right there on that one statement. What is a nonverbal endorsement? A nonverbal endorsement is basically not a word is said, but a message is sent. In other words, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, the tools I'm doing it with, I'm not showing you. I'm not instructing a new person or an unexperienced person on how to do something, but yet I'm getting it done. And so you're sending a message to that new person right here. It's okay to do this. I can do it because I've got the experience. You may not have the experience. Okay. And so that's the end of that. So, the last thing, this is nonverbal action right here.
In the still of the night.
Not one word is going to be said, but there's a lot of communication going on here.
Lay up next to me.
Yep. That's just quick communication. All right. Now what's going to do? There still hadn't been a word said, not one word said. Now watch what happens on the elevator right here. He looks down and sees his key. So at the end of the day, nonverbal actions can not be good. If you work with your hands, you're a laborer. We are. If you work with your hands and use your brains, you're a craft person. Some of the best in the world, bar none. If you work with your hands and you use your brains and you put your heart into it, your soul into it, you're an artist. And that's what I'd like for you to be, is all the artists out there should work to be acceptable and do acceptable work. With that, I'm going to close this session off. I'm sorry I ran so long, Nick. I guess I've talked too much as usual. But basically, there was a message there that I think it resonated just about with everybody out there, I hope. But I think you'll see that working unacceptable sooner or later or down the road, it may not ever happen to you, but you just increase the possibility of injuries and bad things happening to good people when you were unacceptable. So with that, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to turn it back over to Nick and see if he's got any comments, and we'll close out.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying here is extremely important. And, not only are you showing that, you know, acceptance, accepting the unacceptable on the field, so to speak, on the job site, but you're also showing it off and what you do. If you're a leader, people are watching you at all avenues. So if you're posting something on Facebook, you're liking something, maybe some improper cover up, and you're basically saying, hey, that's acceptable. Even though you're making a joke out of it, even though you may not think it's acceptable, you got to remember what the perception is of what you're doing. And I think that's extremely important. And when you are a leader, people are watching you, unfortunately, in today, 24 hours a day with the technology that we have. So that'd be my only comment.
Well, good deal. Well, thank you so again, Nick, for letting me do this. If anybody has any questions or comments, please get in touch with me. My phone rings all the time. So be glad to answer anything else that you may have. God bless you. Take care of one another out there. Work acceptable and work safe, and we'll see you next time.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.